Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Pick Six podcast and our All 32 series. This is the series where we catch up with insiders to give you the need-to-know information on every single NFL team. Will Brinson, Katie Mox here, and today we're covering the Washington Commanders with host of Washington Football Talk on NBC Washington, along with B. Mitch and Finlay on 106.7 The Fan. JP Finlay, thank you for joining us today, JP. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you guys for having me. It's rainy in D.C., but we'll make it.
Oh, mute. Brinson's on mute.
I'm muted. Look at that. Technical difficulties all over the place. Professional podcaster unable to demute himself after 55 years of doing this job. JP, longtime friend of the pod. We got to hang out and have beers recently up in DC. It's pretty nasty down here too. It's supposed to rain for like 3 straight days, which is
my mom and stepdad are out in Wilkes County, and he said they've got like 3 inches of rain in the last couple days, which is a lot of rain. Yeah. It's
like 71 degrees and dreary outside the middle of June, in case anybody was wondering, whether stuff with the earth was changing. But I digress. Anyway, let's talk about a less controversial topic, the Washington Commanders. Somehow. I think we could go in a bunch of different directions when you start with this, but the obvious one, as we talk about and look at this team, is Sam. You and I talked about this on the radio a few months ago. Sam Howell, 5th round pick, once thought to be maybe like a top 5 pick the year before. If he had been drafted in the first 3 rounds, do we view this Commanders team differently going into 2023? And more importantly, JP, is there actually a competition between Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett, and most importantly, can good NC State preside over evil North Carolina? Or is it too far gone?
Okay.
A lot of questions there.
Yeah.
I'll answer with the one I think is the most definitive, and it's Howell's jobs to lose. Like, he's going to get every opportunity. We just watched OTAs and mandatory minicamp. He got every opportunity with the first team there, all of them. And I think he's going to get every opportunity with the first team in mid-August, August 15th and 16th. The Commanders are doing joint practices with the Ravens. I think those 2 days of joint practices, and then their second preseason game is a Monday nighter against the Ravens in Baltimore. It might be at FedEx, but regardless, it's 30 miles up or down 95.
I have to come up for that one. Huh.
Yeah, you should, dude, because that's now the second preseason game is now the closest we see to a real game.
Right. I was really going to look at the White Red Panic tour schedule and see, check it out.
Usually MGM National Harbor. But if Howell looks somewhere between decent to good in that stretch of the joint practices and the game against the Ravens, remember, John Harbaugh, the Ravens have that long-standing preseason win streak. They take the preseason very seriously. If he can look decent to good there, it's his job, period. If he looks bad, if the lights are too bright, maybe Brissett can make a run at this thing. But I'd say it's a 80-85% chance Howell's the week 1 starter and gets a long leash at a chance of developing into something.
You want to tackle this NC State versus UNC good versus evil question?
No. I mean, it's I'm just kidding. So
that's the guy with the Duke basketball back there.
I know. People keep mentioning that. That's in '92 Duke basketball team signed by the entire Brian Davis. Potential.
It's his birthday, by the way. Happy birthday to Brian Davis.
Happy birthday, Brian Davis. You burgeoning billionaire. I hope your finances continue to be as robust as you claim that they
burgeoning billionaire, burgeoning convict. It's somewhere in the middle.
Right. Well, yeah, it's hit or miss. I will say this about Sam Howell. For a guy I don't like most Carolina guys. I don't have a beef against him after I like Sam Howell, and my buddy Zeke, who lives in DC, and is a huge NC State fan, Nationals fan, grew up a Washington football fan. Our fan. He is convinced that the Nationals, after that World Series title, are going to go to crap. They already have. They're going to stay in crap. And that the Washington football team, once Dan Snyder sells and the sale is complete, are going to rise to power under Sam Howell, becoming a superstar. And he's just going to have to root for this Carolina quarterback. Is Zeke's theory. Anyway, I digress. Nobody cares about this.
there's an avenue for that to be the case. I mean, ignoring the rest of the city, the Caps, the Nats, whatever, just for the Commanders with Howell, they've got a pretty good team. Defensively, they could be really good. They've got a lot of talent on at least on the front and the back level. Offensively, I really like most of their skill position players. They've got speed, they've got power. The two biggest questions, unfortunately, have been the biggest questions throughout Ron's time here in Washington, and it is quarterback and offensive line. And the only position you could say definitively has gotten worse under Ron is their offensive line. I mean, when Ron got here, you have two future Hall of Famers in Trent Williams and Brandon Sheriff. Now they're both gone. You could argue that Trent isn't on him, but the Sheriff situation is. And I don't know that they could protect Lamar Jackson this year, so I certainly don't know that they can protect Sam Howell.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that offense a little bit here. What do you think we can expect from an Eric Bieniemy offense with Ron Rivera running the show?
Ron is going to be completely removed offensively. Now, that doesn't mean if it's a big fourth down, it's ultimately his call if you're going to go for it or not, or if it's late in the game and you're playing for a field goal or playing for a touchdown. I mean, he will have some touch points there, obviously. But by and large, I mean, we've already seen it in OTAs and minicamp. Everything is different. I mean, the entire pace and structure of practices is much crisper, a lot more running. And Ron credits Bieniemy for that. Ron is in this interesting phase of his coaching tenure in Washington and maybe kind of his life where he seems happy to be more of a delegator and a manager and somebody trying to look big picture and put things together. But at the same time, people act like there's kind of this automatic quality that comes with Bieniemy. And I can understand why. The guy's won 2 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. I mean, that Chiefs offense, you see it there. I mean, they've been a freight train, but they also have Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. They had Tyreek Hill.
Andy Reid.
Yeah, they don't have any of those guys. Right. Andy Reid offenses have performed with Coy Detmer playing quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how it's going to go. Nobody does. Howell's intriguing athletically. He's got a big arm, smart kid, nice kid, hardworking. Bieniemy's intriguing, a really impressive resume to this point, but we'll see.
So, I mean, and I don't think you're being skeptical per se. I think you're being appropriately skeptical of Bieniemy, especially given that, like, and I understand it sucks that he couldn't get a job. Like Doug Peterson and Matt Nagy got jobs quick out from under Andy Reid. Eric Bieniemy did not. There are a whole variety of possibilities and reasons or reasonable possibilities that you can't really get into right now because we're doing a short pod on Washington. But it is insane to win a second Super Bowl as an offensive coordinator and say, I'm going to leave Patrick Mahomes for Sam Howell in Washington. Now, I guess the theory there is that, like, if Washington's offense is really good, then it solidifies, hey, I deserve a job because you did it outside of the Andy Reid umbrella. On the other hand, like, I mean, to your point, like, is there anything you've seen that could, like, hint at what this offense might look like? I think we're just assuming it's like poor man Andy Reid. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to kind of get a grasp on that.
Yeah, no, those are. I mean, if you want to be skeptical. Not just that he decided to leave KC and land in Washington, but kind of seemed like this was the only opportunity for him. Even more bizarre. As for what the offense will look like, I think it should look a lot like what we've seen from Andy in all spots. Philly, KC. Even if you look at what Nagy did the first year in Chicago with Trubisky, when they were led by that defense, and it was a lot of Mitch on the move, and it was a lot of short stuff. They won 11 games in Chicago. I think Nagy was coach of the year that year. I think you try to emulate a lot of that, frankly, and that is still the Reid system. Charles Leno, their left tackle, was on those Bears teams, and Ron referenced that, which I found kind of somewhere between interesting and bizarre. But I think you'll see plenty of that. They've got really good skill position players, and what that Reid offense, which is really just an evolved West Coast Bill Walsh offense, is short stuff where pre-snap motion shows a quarterback the quick hitters that'll be available to take a quick profit. And I think with particularly Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, guys that can make plays with the ball in their hand after the catch. I think they'll try to do a lot of that. And then I think they like their backs. I think they're going to try to run the ball. The issue to me is going to be turnovers. You got a young quarterback. If he turns it over a bunch, you're going to have big trouble. And I honestly think that's why they signed Jacoby Brissett, who's almost kind of the polar opposite of Sam Howell. Like, Howell's going to try to make exciting plays, explosive plays. Brissett doesn't. I mean, Brissett in his career averages 140 yards passing a game. And we're talking over the 50 starts. Like, there's a big body of work here. But what he also doesn't do is turn the ball over. And the Chiefs, with Bieniemy on that staff, won a lot of games with a guy like that in Alex Smith. And Alex was better than Brissett, but Brissett is on a Alex trajectory. And, you know, if this thing goes 6 games, 8 games, and they're not winning and Sam's turning it over, maybe you flip it to Brissett at that point. I'm not sure I see it. I think you're going to have a new owner. If this thing's going sideways anyway, they may just want to see what the kid's got because they're firing everybody anyway. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's intriguing to find out.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I mean, how many NFL head coaches have been through 2 like ownership changes? I mean, it's crazy. Like, Ron was there when Tepper bought the team from Jerry Richardson, and obviously sort of different circumstances.
I mean, 2 relatively rushed sales because the owner got in
trouble,
like conduct, behavioral.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It's crazy. Like Ron Rivera, the guy, remember Ron just hold up. Look, Ron's a great guy. All right. I got questions. Ron's a great guy. It's like crazy that he keeps finding himself embroiled in these situations.
Great human.
Yes. Great human being. Here's a great wide receiver, Terry McLaurin. Coming up, we're going to take a break. And coming up next, I'll ask you if there's another breakout candidate on this roster. Okay. So Terry McLaurin, what's the I'm going to ask multiple questions again. I'm sorry.
Wow.
How's the chemistry been with Terry McLaurin and Sam Howell? And is there room with this offense, which we don't really know much about, for a second breakout wide receiver, AKA Jahan Dotson?
The Terry Sam stuff is interesting. I think it's super premature to make a declaration on that. If you go back to the only start Sam had, I'm pulling up the box score real quick. Sam got to start week 18 against the Cowboys. Howell faced the Cowboys. He won. People here are extremely excited that he beat the Cowboys. He only completed 11 passes for 169 yards. But of those passes, 3 of them for 74 yards went to McLaurin, including a deep 50-yard bomb touchdown. So I'm going to care more about that, the one game they played together where it looked like a really strong connection, than I am going to mini camp where it didn't seem like Sam was looking at Terry all that often. It did seem like Sam and Jahan Dotson had good chemistry in mini camp, but they're admittedly in the early stages of the installation of a new offense that is wordy and complex. And minicamp, and particularly OTAs prior to that, are so scripted that it's entirely possible that the media wasn't told, but the players were told, Sam, we want to see you go to Jahan as much as possible just to work on it, right? So I think McLaurin is a stud, man. He's been a stud with Taylor Heineke, with Carson Wentz.
So good.
Go back to his rookie year when it was Haskins and Alex Smith and Kyle Allen. Like he's produced with anybody. So I would expect the same with him, really. But I think Dotson could have a really good year too.
You don't get a nickname like Scary Terry without being that good. So there's a lot of question marks on the offense. I will say that Sam Howell to win the MVP is at plus 12,500 if you think he could have a breakout year. But a bright spot for the Commanders, at least in the last few seasons, has been the defense. And our Pete Prisco thinks that Washington will be really good, their defense this year. Do you agree with that assessment?
Prisco's list certainly made some in the DC sports radio circuit. So I think the defense should be really good. I think defensive evaluations fluctuate so much year to year, and a lot of that, I think people focus way too much on strength of schedule, where you should really focus on quarterbacks you're going to face. Last year, the Commanders faced Sam Ehlinger, Davis Mills, Ryan Tannehill. They played the AFC South and Trevor Lawrence, but it was week 1 before he had really kind of figured some things out. This year, instead of the AFC South, they get the AFC East. So Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Tua, and whatever's going on in New England. I think that's a significant change. Like, I just defensively, they've invested a ton. Their first 2 draft picks this year were to bolster the secondary. I think both those guys will play and be quite good in Emmanuel Forbes and Quan Martin. It's just, they should be good, but there's a lot of fluctuation in defensive rankings year over year. In the past 2 seasons, 2 years ago, the Commanders were 31st in the NFL in third down stops, in forcing punts on third downs. This past season, they were first in the NFL. So is the reality the seesaw nature of that, or somewhere in the middle, or do we just have no idea? And I argue perhaps we have no idea. They have good talent.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, like, you look at the defense and you hear, it's easy like an off season too to get optimistic about anything, right? I mean, like, except for the Arizona Cardinals, like that's the only thing you can't get optimistic about if you're an NFL fan base. But I mean, you do look at the defense, you're like, all right, like if Ron does, what he's supposed to do, and this gets cooking, and they got Jack Del Rio there, who's been consistent. But I think you're right. That sort of the third down stuff, or you look at like being able to force punts. One, I mean, there's just some luck involved. There's going to be some regression naturally. And then 2, if you're playing a bunch of bad teams, you're going to just force them to punt more often, especially if you're playing bad offenses, and the AFC East does not look like it's going to be bad. What was the biggest biggest Prisco thing? Was it Cameron Curl in the top 100 or?
So, I mean, I kind of get that. Cam Curl's really good, and he doesn't get the maybe notoriety he deserves. But I think it was more John Allen not being in the top 100. I think he's played at a really high level for 3-4 years now to make that list. But, interior D-line in the NFL has kind of become stacked.
Really has.
Like across the league. I think Allen belongs to be on there. There are people that took umbrage with where Terry ranked some of the receivers he ranked behind. But, dude, it's June. It's list season. People are supposed to get mad about it. It's content. Like, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the sale of the team. That's probably the biggest news surrounding. It hit a little bit of a snag, seems to be potentially moving forward. Like, how does this impact the team? And do you think that this sale will actually go through by the season start?
Yeah, 100%. I think the sensationalism that surrounds Dan Snyder, and then a town like DC, where the Commanders are far and away the biggest thing, and you've got a large media market where everything gets like micro reported. A lot of steps in a gigantic financial process have been made to seem like hurdles or roadblocks, when in fact, I think they are just steps in a gigantic financial process. The sources I've talked to throughout this thing, I mean, up here, I was the first person to report Harris was the front runner, when most people were like, I don't know who that is. They got the cash. They got the wherewithal. Not to mention, nobody else wanted this. Bezos was never a real contender. The Canadian dude, it's come out that he only had $400 or $500 million. He never even had
Brian Davis. Damn it,
Brian Davis. I mean, make sure your own. I don't want to.
Was the Canadian guy really only had a couple $100 million?
He had to pull out of buying the Ottawa Senators.
Oh my God!
Not just Washington Commanders. The only real other offer from a person that has proven to have the money was the dude Fertitta from Houston that owns the Rockets, and he only offered, I think, $5 billion. He's like, that's what they're worth to me. Really? And frankly, I think he's making a play that the world knows if the Texans ever come up, he's got the cash.
Right.
I mean, that's my theory, but this is Harris, was always going to be Harris, and is done before the first preseason game.
It's interesting too. You point out like the market, because like when the Panthers got sold, I mean, David Tepper wasn't going to be a problem. He was already cleared because he was a minority owner with the Steelers, and that facilitated it, obviously. But like just the reporting around all that was so different. And I get it. It's in Washington. It was just Washington versus Charlotte. You know what I mean? Like you were doing, like you did radio shows where the whole day you were probably talking about this sale.
Oh, we did weeks where that's all we talked about.
Right, which is crazy. Like you, and then like they're like talking about the Hornets. Like anybody gives a crap about the Hornets.
Something that's really interesting, Brinson, that you said there is, well, you're like, well, it was always going to be Tepper because he was a minority partner of the Steelers. So is Harris.
Right.
Harris, too. People are acting like he wasn't going to get this team. Like,
right.
The ownership in the Steelers is the path to getting your own team.
Correct.
Ask David Tepper. The Rooneys are like the clearinghouse for the league. So I think it's just a sensationalism surrounding this team and this hopefully former owner. Pretty soon.
You could also argue too that like losing Dan Snyder, while great for the team and great for the fan base and great in general for humanity and whatnot, is also like bad for selling, for clicks. I mean, Dan Snyder. Yeah, I'm just saying. If you want to be a conspiracy theorist, all right. Let's.
Bill Barnwell rated the sale of the Commanders
the
number one thing this offseason in the entire NFL, more than Rodgers going to New York. So
exactly,
I kind of agree with him too.
I wouldn't disagree. That's a good point. Yeah. Okay, let's talk some gambling. What do you think about the Washington? Yeah, Washington win total over 6.5 minus 120. JP.
It makes me nervous that they've said it. This team has won 7, 7, and 8 the last 3 years. Locally, people are all over the over there, and Vegas is getting extra big to go on the over. They got a tough schedule, dude. You got a young quarterback. You've got 4 new starters on the offensive line. At least 2 of them with significant injury questions and not a ton of depth. The defense should be better, but we've talked about defensive fluctuations. The one thing they have tried to address is they didn't create a lot of turnovers. I think drafting Emmanuel Forbes in the first round, they're really trying to address that in the pass game at least. This would make me nervous, dude. And my heart is over all day, but my head is a little wary of that. It seems like they're begging you to take the over.
They're begging you to take the over at minus 120, but if you look at total wins in the division, that's at 2.5 with the under juiced to minus 140. So not looking like the books at least think they're going to get 3 wins in the division. Now we do know that the NFC East is probably the most powerful division right now in football, at least in the NFC. So yeah, it's hard for me to say that they're going to get more than 3 wins in division, but somehow get 7 wins.
I mean, if they lose to Arizona in week 1, that over is adios amigo.
I mean, it's stupid, but it's a legit must win week 1 against Arizona.
Yes, and I must win.
Yes.
Like the argument here is the defense is going to be just as good, and there's no way the quarterback play will be as bad as it was with Wentz and Hines.
That's not.
And I just don't know that either of those are certainties like people want them to be.
There are definitely pathways. There's definitely a pathway where both of those things converge, and Washington is good and wins 10 games. I mean, that's not out of the question.
Winning, one of the weirdest things that I looked at from some of the books is they'll offer you specific wins. Like they'll win 5 games, 6 games, 7 games. And the books are tilting towards you get better. It's lower odds, I suppose, that they lose 5 games, that they win 5 games instead of 9 games. Like they don't see things going well here.
Yeah, they sure don't. Okay. I could. Yeah. By the way, I should point this out before we let you go. They were like, we want you guys to do 20 minutes. They're like, we had a couple pods last year. I think you're talking panic with JP where they ran long.
I think we went deep for
we did good deep. I think we were coming out of the gate, but it was it was a good talk. It was just
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Enjoyed this as well. All right. Would you dabble in Sam Howell MVP at all? 125 to 1? I'm just kidding. All right, JP. Thanks, buddy.
Yes, JP, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Stay tuned for more All 32 with daily drops in your podcast feed and on YouTube. JP, again, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck to the Commanders this year.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, man.